kind of a princess are you?
Huh?
Do you have magic hair?
I mean, only when I feel like an edgy shadow paladin player.
Were you poisoned?
Does Zarzan count?
And now for the million-dollar question. Do people assume all your problems got solved because a big, strong man showed up?
Big, strong man.
She is a princess!
Cool. What's up, amigos? Today we're going to do an updated Prism premium deck profile. This is more of a fun deck and I'm excited to share. This deck has many directions that you can take it. This is heavily inspired with the standard build currently in the metagame. Over the years, Prism has different grade 3s and grade 4 support that has evolved the deck in different directions too. In this build, we're going to take advantage of the Labrador name and also the support card specifically from standard into premium. Strides that we can utilize is Heltrauda, Garnet, and a few other Prism support cards as well. We also have access to phenomenal G-Guards where we can have more dynamic plays now, especially with the grade 1 Latte and the new Jackal Parade card.
Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. The great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase.
So starting off with the grade 3s, we're playing 4 copies of Labrador. So we want to maximize this so we can see it as our Vanguard. A lot of the support that's new does rely on that Labrador specific name, so you can't just run any prisms such as like Vert and other like generic grade 3 prisms that we've had in the past. So this is super important, but this also takes advantage of Persona Ride. So you can actually Persona Ride and also go into Stride immediately and still benefit from the blanket 10 plus to the front row still. A lot of the primary skill that is used is the one that's on attack, call 2, draw a card, plus 5 to the front row and get a crit if your opponent's a grade 3 or greater. This comes up with the Heltrauda place, but also if you're going first as a grade 3. We are playing 3 copies of the Colored Pop Dragon. And so this is the one that essentially, if you discard it by striding, you get to draw a card. So this helps a ton while having enough cards in your hand. Not only you want to build a hand size that's decent, but Heltrauda makes you discard before you even see any drive checks. So it's pretty difficult sometimes to build a field that's actually decent while also having enough cards to discard before you even see your drive check. This also can be called onto Rearguard Circle to counterblast, become a beater, and draw a card as soon as you're on stride, essentially, because you are grade 4 technically. We are playing 2 order cards that are grade 3s as well, 1 super aesthetic shot and 1 bracing angel ladder. So just like in standard, we appreciate the extra 5k for each of our Rearguards to be able to push a little bit with the extra counterblast. You'll notice with this deck, thanks to Latte, both Princess Latte and the new Latte will help you countercharge, so counterblast is not an issue. In fact, you can do a lot of your plays with a single counterblast that you can keep countercharging throughout your turn, essentially. You could also use this as pitch to fodder if needed to, worst case scenario. Bracing Angel Ladder is definitely for the Shiranui matchup, but it also just helps protect your Rearguards for any disruptive types of plays. So that way you can still do things that you can still do your plays, especially since your timings are very important, like Celtic pop off at the end of its battle, so that way you can bounce the whole column, essentially, they usually do. So you can also bounce the grade 1 to get your counter charge and continue on your turn. A well-timed disruptive play will definitely ruin your turn. These cards are also searchable because we are playing copies of Aura in the deck as well. But I know Bracing Angel Ladders and Auras are also like not cheap, so you don't have to play these cards. Again, this is more of a fun deck, so you can utilize different cards and make room for other things, maybe in the grade 2s, or maybe add some different spice too. I'll mention some options at the end of the video too. 4 copies of the grade 3 heal. So this is cool because if you don't have any other ways to pitch your stride, this helps because it's a grade 3, but also lets you survive the early game. If your damage is denied for some whatever reason, you can give yourself a damage as well, and it's just much more appreciated. Also, since you're typically seeing 5 dry checks thanks to Heltrauda turns, and even with the grade 4 Vert as well, you can potentially see more triggers, which causes you to heal as well, which is nice. 4 copies of the Celtic that came out in D format, so this card is awesome. It's 50k on its own, assuming that you have a Labrador Vanguard. It becomes 10k shield as well if you have a Labrador Vanguard. And then the second skill at the end of the battle, if you have a Labrador Vanguard, you can Soul Blast to bounce this and another Prism unit. So you can bounce your column, you can bounce your front row entirely, you have some flexibility there, but this card is definitely the bread and butter of this deck. Like again, this is heavily inspired from the standard build, so this is the main card to find it and go to, essentially. Now, cards to help find that card is definitely Prison Image Rosa. So as soon as these cards came out for standard, I was thinking of like premium goodness that you can use, and it's Rosa for sure from the V series. And this lets you basically counterblast one, whether it be Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, check top 7 and grab a Prism card and add it to your hand. And then if you want, you can bind another one as well. It's optional. You you could actually just grab the card that you need for Prism wise. This lets you get combo pieces such as like Celtic, Persona Red copies like Labrador, but of course you could even search for the Prism PGs or even in the heals that you do play them as well, and different triggers too. So you have a lot of room with the older support and more targets that you can grab with this card too, making this card overall phenomenal as well. Also, like a backup Rosa, we have the Petronil. So this is heavily used in standard, but in here we have Rosa, so we can use less copies of this, but we can have basically like 6 copies of Rosa in a way. Again, same skill, kind of bless 1, check top 7, and grab a Prism. And then it has the additional skill where at the end of the battle, this attack, if you have a Labrador or Vanguard, this can bounce back to a hand. So this is kind of nice where you can have your initial attacks. Typically, Heltrauda can actually just bounce your entire field, so it's not as necessary, but it is nice to have as well. 2 copies of the Jackal Parade. So this is an awesome card. So this is not for the Senia support or whatsoever. It's the skill when it's placed on Rearguard Circle, choose one of your opponent's front rows, and they can bounce it back to the hand. So why are you playing this type of card? That's because in Premium, we have G-Guards such as Citron that can call grade 1s or more to the field. So you have access to a disruptive play where you can get rid of a problem Rearguard in their front row. You can also use this during your turn if need to be, but most of the time I just keep them in hand while I'll call other Rearguards that are more suited for your turn to play out essentially. Onto the Lates. So this is the first pair of 3 that we're playing. So this is the D support one. Again, this will get 5k if this was called to Rearguard or Guardian Circle from hand. And if you have a Labrador Vanguard, of course. But if it's bounced and you do have a Labrador Vanguard, you may soul charge. And if you did not CC this turn, then you can counter charge as well. So essentially you can soul charge up to 0 or up to 1. So you could choose 0. And then you could only counter charge once per turn. In D format, that's good enough, but in Premium, you definitely want to do that multiple times. So that's why we're only playing 3 copies of this, but in addition, we are playing the Princess Late from the old days, from Limit Break era. And so very similar skill that when it's bounced, you can soul charge, you'll soul charge and counter charge. This is mandatory too, by the way. So deck out is an issue with this deck, so be moderate with your resources. But I like this card more because you can just continually reuse it because you'll be superior calling during the battle phase multiple times. So you can get around it's like you cannot be normal called condition essentially if you do the skill once already in the turn. But you can keep giving +4 to cards that are also appreciated, such as your other Rearguard columns or even your Vanguard, whatever makes sense during those game states. So having 6 counter charges is really nice actually. Not to mention that the other Late is also 10k shield, so worst case scenario, you can use that as shield fodder, but you really just need to see one and then you could just keep abusing the same one over and over essentially. We are playing 2 copies of the Prism PG, and so this is really cool because it's searchable thanks to Rosa, thanks to Petronil, and so this is really nice just to have the defensive quality of our hand build up without just having to drop so many cards to guard, especially if we're using the old support such as like the grade 1 support that's like Princess Late, for example. It's only 5k shield, so having searchable perfect guards really help a lot in that sense. It also has the axe skill that when it's in the drop you can remove it, you can bind it essentially and then basically change your Vanguard's Limit Break 5 skill into a Limit Break 4. That does come up, especially if you're relying on cards such as like Garnet that gives the inherent crit to all the prisms during that turn. That makes it a lot easier to do if you are just on 4 damage. We are playing 1 Sanctitude because it's such a good card, definitely needed in this deck and can definitely abuse it as well. And it can be searched thanks to 3 copies of Aura. So this is searching for any order in particular. You can search your Blitz orders, you can search your normal orders such as your grade 3s like Bracing Angel and of course Super Aesthetic Shot as well. So it's a very utility card that you can call early on, have that pressure as a booster, whether it be the Vanguard column or later on your Rearguard columns to make like small pokes and make the opponent debate if they need to take that or not, and retires itself to grab that card that you need. So it helps Decton as well. But against certain matchups, this helps it a lot more easier to search for Bracing Angel Ladder if you feel like that's more relevant for that deck per se. Again, I'll mention some other options that you can do if you don't have this card because I know the demand for this card has gone up as well. You can play any V starter as long as you get a draw in the ticket, of course. We're playing a bunch of crit in this build too, and so for the first couple of crits, we were playing the full play set of the Strike crit. Again, you want to use your other grade 3s for the resources, but you also want to make sure that you have enough cards to be able to stride, but also the combo pieces to use for that turn. And cards like Heltrauda too, like that ask for that discard immediately. So just having more options to be able to pay the cost of stride makes it a lot easier. We also have the GB1 crit that goes into Soul and gives your Vanguard plus 10k, assuming you're GB1, of course. This helps with just like Heltrauda turns, of course. Just keep in mind that Heltrauda bounces everything, and then the Labrador only calls Prism, so you have to do this up front at that point. Helps with the soul count in case you need it at that point too. But also it's a card that's easily able to go into the soul and draw you an extra card to dig deeper for a combo piece that you actually may want. during the battle phase too as well. We're playing 2 of the Reinas. This is the errata ones. And the main reason for this is because 1, crit pressure, 2, when it's damage check, you get the extra draw. So that is still appreciative because we are a combo build. And the third Reina is the 30k Sentinel one, because we only were playing 3 Sentinels in the grade 1 lineup. So this is the 4th one. Just 1 card drop is a lot appreciated too. The last crit that we're playing is 1 copy of the Sunshine Clear. This is a weaker trigger, but it is searchable with the top 7 cards, but also like it'll go back into deck too. You can call up to either Vert, Rosa, or Clear, for example. But we are only playing Rosa in this build, so that's your only target, but it's a good target still, right? You can actually promote another attack, but you can also bounce it back to your hand if needed. And then lastly, of course, the Lyrical Monasterio OT. So I like this card because it's, if you see this any point in the game, especially early on, you have it for the rest of your game, and your deck revolves on multi-attack, both Vanguard and Rearguards, so everything benefits from it essentially. Well, technically Rearguards, but you know what I mean. You could also play the blue OT or the red OT if you want to. That's totally up to you. Also, real quick plug, if you need some help with metafight coaching, whether it be one-on-one or even deck reviews or preparation for this tournament season coming up, happy to help out where I can. Check out my page and also the testimonials. Onto the G zone. So we're playing 1 copy of Harmonics. You still want that 20k shield. This is also good against Link Joker, but also we have means for that with Heltrauda as well. But this also can give you damage if needed to. 2 Heltrauda. So this is a great card. I think you can get away with 2. Typically, this card is costly too, so you may go back to your other strides later on if need to be. There's other ways to have multiple Vanguard attacks, but also you do run the risk of deck out too, so you might go into another stride, which I'll highlight too, to preserve that. Such a useful stride just in general. 2 copies of Shining Garnet, and so this is the one that actually can copy your hearts. This only copies 1 ability, so just keep in mind, it's not like Chain Ranker or Crystal Luster where it copies everything. I wish we had that in Prisms, but you get to choose 1 for a Counterblast, and then of course the Limit Break 5 skill that gives crit everything. This is really cool where it basically makes that Labrador turn a better Labrador turn, especially if you're able to Persona Ride and then use cards like the Aesthetic Shot to even give you more power, or if you already seen the OT, it gets even more nuts at that point too. For other like generic prison support, you can use the Labrador. And technically, if you have a grade 3 that isn't Labrador but is a Prism, you can try this, and now you technically have the Labrador name, so you can take advantage of the Labrador specific cards. But this is really for damage deny, or there's not much you got going on, and essentially those Rearguards that you call will just bounce back safely in their hand, of course, to get an additional 5k too. They can also boost too if needed, so it's really up to you how you feel build up that field. But the main caveat is that it doesn't use a Counterblast, so it's just nice to have a pair just in case because it Persona flips. However, the other type of multi-Vanguard type of turn is the Sunshine Vert, the grade 4 version. This is a Limit Break 4, so since we're not playing Limit Break enablers, we have to rely on being 5 or 4 damage for this turn, essentially. Be careful with this too, because during your drive checks, you could heal out of Limit Break 4. That's happened to me multiple times, but it is another way to restand or essentially have multiple Vanguard attacks. This does not trigger Persona Ride during the battle phase, unfortunately. Persona Ride only works naturally from normal riding, specifically from the hand. The only unit that can do that by effect is the Aurora, essentially, with bad bouncy. But I just wanted to make that clear that this vert does not trigger the Persona Ride, unfortunately. If it did, that'd be freaking phenomenal, right? But why? Also, the benefit about this card is that you get to discard after your drive checks too. So this is one of the pro versus like Heltrauda. But again, you have to be Limit Break 4. This could be a third Heltrauda, but I decided to stick with the An. She's pretty generic at that point. You bounce everything on the field, and then depending if you get like 5 or even 7 more, you get multiple drive. You get an additional drive check power and all this kind of stuff. This bounces cards too, so this helps against Link Joker as well. But I haven't really used it recently too, but you can play it for something else, such as like a Megiddo or a Balonera. It's technically using those zero-offs as well, because it's the Magna Nation. Wintero, this is what I was explaining, that you may not want to go into a third Heltrauda because you're getting close to deck out, so this actually bottom decks the 3 cards instead. So it can kind of give you an extra turn, or maybe just to live the following turn essentially, and then come back with whatever you have left essentially. 2 Cytrons. So again, just like we have that disruptive play now thanks to Jackal Parade, I figured the 2 is nice because it is free to use essentially. That's the benefit about this play. It's pretty free to do. This also gets a really good shield too, so it's definitely appreciated. Once it's on the field, you can use cards like Leona to bounce it back if you want to use a second Citron. This requires 2 to 3 gigahertz depending on your game state, but this is also a card that you can use to bounce Late from the field to your hand and give yourself a 4k buff during your opponent's turn. So that's actually super helpful in certain like multi-attack pokes with certain decks too. But you could also basically just soul charge and counter charge during your opponent's turn if you just have a leftover Late exile. Similar to this card, you have the Diva of Salvation one, and it has multiple effects, but it gets more shield, but of course it uses a counterblast. So if you do bounce a Late, you basically refund yourself for like a 30k shield. I still play the Sandy just in case. If you have a massive sized hand enough and you just need this shield, this is typically the first G-Guard that you can use immediately. And then you can go into your follow like Citron and your other like Leona type of G-Guards as well. Stride onto Heltrauda. Use other skills in the meantime like Counterblast 1 to draw a card. Call the rest of your field here. 23 here. 22 right here. On attack, skill. Discard 3. Bounce everything. Call 2 cards. Her skill, Soul Charge 1 to counter charge with Late. +4 to the column. Triple drive here. End the battle. Counterblast 1. Soul Blast 1. Stand your heart. Attack with the column. Any triggers as well. At the end of the battle, Soul Blast 1. Bounce the column itself. Late again. Counter Soul Charge and Counter Charge. Labrador attack. Scale Counter Blast 1. You can call column or you can call them separately. It's totally up to you. In this example, I'll just call a column. Draw a card. +5. Gets crit. Twin drive and attack. End the battle again to bounce these. And then Soul Charge and Counter Charge one more time. You can Persona Ride next turn, stride into Garnet. You'll still have the Persona Ride. Use her skill to copy the Heart of Labrador to be able to call on attack. All field. Limit Break 5 is active, so all Prism attacks have plus crit. You can attack with the weakest first if you want. Attack here, skill. Soul Blast 1, bounce the 2 front row. Then on attack, Labrador skill. Call both of them, draw a card +5 additionally, and gets crit as well. Triple drive, attack this way. 28, 38, 43, and +8 triggers if end the battle. Soul Blast 1. Bounce the column, Late skill, Soul Charge, Counter Charge, and repeat. Same thing. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it. And so, again, this is more of a fun deck. I thought I'd share with it. And then, again, there's some other alternatives that you can play. There's a lot of Prism support over the years. The other build that's worth building would be the one with the grade 3 Vert and the grade 4 Nectoria in the main deck. And now you're reliant on the Force Marker generation. This is still a solid deck in its own because you could also take advantage of Limit Break enablers to make Prism Vert, the grade 4, live on first stride essentially too. Unfortunately, with the new Labrador support, you can't really use that as you would hope to be. But one of the cards you could use technically is the Petronil. So Petronil's play skill to counterblast and search the top 7. That is not required of a Labrador. That's what's really nice about this card in standard is that you can call this on grade 2 turn and actually start searching for a combo piece, or even your grade 3 right target. So if you feel like you need a consistency boost with that deck build, you can play the Petronil as an addition. As mentioned with the orders and then auras and other grade 1s, you can play different cards or increase the ratios that you have. You can go full Prism PGs if you want to. You could also play the Limit Break enablers like I mentioned. There's other grade 2 Prisms that are kind of decent at that point. You got the Princess Celtic that's unhit. You also got the original one that when it's bounced, you can Soul Blast and give something +4. Those numbers actually do add up too. And for the grade 1s, if you have Yukas, for example, just chilling, you can use Yukas in those builds as well. Or even like Justine, for example, for discard fodder and it calls itself. There's many options that you can go generically, but also Prism-wise as well. Let me know in the comments like what other suggestions that you would think with Prisms, especially now that, you know, they're pretty a solid deck in standard. And it's cool just to be able to like bring this back into premium and have an updated deck profile too. Let me know again in the comments what you think as well. And if you want to support the channel, use the affiliate links such as like 50 cards, Trading Card Mint, TCG Player, Card Trader 0, and also check out Dueling Guard's phenomenal anime products to increase your anime swag. Till next time, amigos. Bye!